Hey everyone, this is the Whirling Circles podcast. I'm your host Sean Garcia, joined as always by Frank Allen. Very excited to be with you all this week. We have a little bit of a different kind of episode this week. We've talked about it and foreshadowed that we would do some of these, and we're excited to do one. But we're going to be doing kind of a fight analysis of an upcoming fight happening in the UFC. It's a pretty big fight, but we wanted to talk about it and give our little 2 cents on it. And it's a little bit different from some of the other shows that we've done. But as you know, on this podcast, we love to talk everything martial arts, and that includes combat sports, and that includes having analysis of some of these modern day athletes in the mixed martial arts community. So, Frank, how you feeling this week?
Fine, hanging
Yeah,
in there.
yeah, we're still in the new year here. It feels like the same year, but it's okay. We'll move through
Yeah,
it.
well, it hasn't changed much.
Exactly.
Hopefully, we'll have a political change, but I don't think there's going to be too much change for a while in the social and medical scene. But hopefully, we have a political scene changing.
Yeah.
There's a big push to keep it the same today.
Yeah. When we're recording this, there's still some potential obstacles, which is kind of crazy to think about. But it is what it is. So yeah, we'll see when things shake out later on this month. But yeah, so the fight that we're gonna be talking about this week is happening in the upcoming UFC 257, I think is the UFC. And that's a fight between, or a rematch rather, between Dustin Poirier and Conor McGregor. And so there's a lot of hype around this fight, and also just in general and things that are happening within the lightweight division in the UFC. It's been a weird year for sports in general, but the UFC has probably been one of the few sports that's been able to put out regular productions throughout the pandemic and work through that process, which something to be said about that. But yeah, this rematch there's some hype about it. So for those who don't know, basically the first time that they fought, McGregor and Poirier, was back in 2014, in the fall of 2014, I think. And so we're talking 6.5 years ago. Um, and this was also too at the fairly in the fairly early stages of Conor McGregor's entrance into the UFC. He only had been in the UFC for maybe like a year and a half prior to that. He had only had, I think, three, maybe four fights prior to that. He had a big ACL injury after like his second or third fight, took him out for a couple months. So it's fairly early in his career in the UFC, and Dustin was seen as the first top 10 contender that he went up against. And that kind of started his journey, McGregor's journey to, becoming one of the biggest stars in the UFC community with the defeat of Poirier. It was a first round TKO, which we could talk about how that went down too, because I have some mixed opinions on that call. But it was a first round defeat in favor of McGregor. And so Dustin's kind of been through up and downs since then, always staying a contender, but never really holding a belt. I know he had like an interim belt at one point, but McGregor went on to hold three belts after that, and go into boxing and become this star, this evil villain star. And he's had his up and downs in the past couple of years for sure, but made his comeback last year. He had his last fight in January last year, right before the pandemic hit, against Cowboy Cerrone, and had a nearly perfect win, some people would say. But that's really all he's done in the past few years, while Dustin's kind of been a little bit more active. So there's a lot being built into this. But of course, the thing I wanted to talk about, Frank, first is kind of the opening in the lightweight division, right? The champion has basically said that he's retiring from the sport, and that of course is
Well,
Khabib.
yeah, well, of course, Dana White said he's not. In fact, they're leaving the title with him. This should probably be a title fight, but they're refusing to do it because Dana White is convinced he could get Khabib to come back. And a couple of things. Number one, Khabib's father said he wanted him to go 30-0 before he quit. And Dana always thinks if you throw enough money at someone, it'll happen no matter what. And I think he's wrong. I mean, yes, his father wanted him to go 30-0, but his father has passed away, and his mother wants him to quit now. And he's a very family-oriented kid, so he's taking that into consideration. And I don't think there's any way that Dana can get him to come back to fight any of the current lightweights. There's no reason to. He's cleaned up the lightweight division. There's no one that he owes a rematch to. There's no reason to come back. It seems like the only thing he's interested in, and there's some talk that it might happen, is the only chance Dana has of getting him back is if he can put together a super fight with Khabib versus Georges St. Pierre.
Mm.
And St. Pierre's kind of interested because that would mean St. Pierre had titles in 3 weight classes, which no one has done. His whole career is at welterweight. Then he made that comeback and won the middleweight title from who do you win it from? The Englishman.
Oh yeah. I forget.
Uh,
I'm horrible with names. People are gonna find that out quickly.
I'm usually not, but Mike Bisping.
Oh
He
yes, yes,
came
yes,
back.
against Bisbee. Yeah.
He came back and won it from Mike Bisping, and it was a good idea for him. Bisping was kind of a contender who no one ever thought would be a champion, and him managing to knock out Luke Rockhold was considered an outstanding fight. But he was not ever considered one of the top tier pound for pound guys. So it was a good fight for St. Pierre. And it was moving up a weight class, and he hadn't been fighting. I think St. Pierre coming back and fighting Khabib's a horrible idea for St. Pierre. He's got to go
Mm.
down a weight class that he's never done. Who knows how much strength he'll maintain? He's fighting an undefeated super champion, not a contender
Right.
who managed to win a title. And he's fighting, for that matter, he's fighting a guy with 2 eyes. Bisping was actually blind in one eye by then.
Mm.
Yeah, he managed
Yep.
to fight the end of his career by, well, still being blind in one eye. He now
Right.
has a
And some
prosthetic that
people
goes over
argue
his.
that Khabib is still in his prime.
Well, that's what I said.
Yeah.
Khabib is completely in his prime, undefeated champion in a weight class down. I think it's a horrible move for St. Pierre, but he might do it. And I think that's
It'll
the
definitely
only.
be a big payout. You know.
Yep, and that's the only. Well, neither of them need the money.
Yeah.
And Khabib doesn't care about the money. Khabib would do it for the fame of beating Georges St. Pierre.
Yeah.
And I think he probably would. But I think that's the only fight he could come back for.
Yeah.
Both Dana White and Conor McGregor have this fantasy that he's going to come back and rematch McGregor. And he, as he said flat out over and over again, no, I'm not doing that. I don't have to. And he's right. He doesn't have to. There's no question about that match.
Yeah, I think. I
And
mean, so both of these guys, McGregor and Poirier, both lost to Khabib recently. And yeah, and like you said, Khabib just kind of handled them. Like there wasn't even a close match, between Khabib and any of. Feel how you feel about Khabib, but he definitely has dominated that division. So, like you're saying, it's kind of like definitely an undisputed kind of belt.
as a fighter, he's outstanding. There's no doubt about it that he is probably the best fighter out there if he's still fighting, but the best fighter out there at the moment.
Yeah,
His personal life, his personal opinions, his personal friends. Well, let's not get into that. But as
yeah,
a
yeah,
fighter, as a fighter, he is absolutely the best that's happening, and that's
yeah,
why it'd be pretty ballsy for St. Pierre to try and come back and drop a weight class he's never been in
yeah,
and take
definitely.
him on. But that's the only fight I think Khabib will come back for. This probably should have been a title fight because they're about the best that Dana has left in this weight class.
Right.
Them and Gagey, and they both did better against Khabib than Gagey did. Gagey was very disappointing against Khabib, but it kind of got starry-eyed, I think. But
Yeah, definitely.
on paper these two are a perfect match. They're both 5'9". They're both come in at 155. They both have striking backgrounds, but have developed overall skills. Connor's 22-4. Poirier's 26-6.
Hmm.
I mean, they have equivalent records. Old time boxing lore says in rematches, the guy who won the first one 90% of the time wins the second one, but that's based on rematches taking place in a reasonable amount of time, and a
Mm-hmm.
rematch within a year. Rematch 6 years down the line, that doesn't hold because they're both completely different fighters.
Right. A whole
Poirier's
different phase of
probably
their career.
Poirier's probably 2, 3 times better than
And
he
a
was
different weight
back
class.
then.
They felt their first fight was a welterweight, right? Or featherweight.
Featherweight.
Yeah, so
First
they're
fight was featherweight. This one will be up one, and this is also it's going to be Poirier's natural weight class,
right.
and it's going to be McGregor trying to get down to lightweight after fighting mostly at welterweight.
That's right. Well, yeah. So
And
one of the things Poirier said after that first fight was that, I mean, basically he changed his career after that. He went lightweight after that and said that he didn't want to do any more of the weight cutting because it was affecting his game. I mean, we hear this all the time in professional, fighters, that the weight cuts are just so damaging and so rough on you. And so basically, he made that shift right after that fight back in 2014 to be a lightweight fighter. So yeah, like you're saying, he feels more comfortable at that weight. He's stronger at that weight, and I think he wanted, if he could go back, he would want to have fought McGregor at the weight the first go around.
he also changed camps after that fight, and he was in a nice camp, but his whole thing was from his little Lafayette camp, he moved to top team in Florida.
That's right,
And
in
the whole thing
Florida.
is, it always makes a world of difference to have world class guys to spar with and train with every day. Although his original club was a nice club. The first I ever heard of Poirier was there's a documentary out there called Fightville,
Mm.
and it's all about Crazy Tim Creeder and his gym in Lafayette, Louisiana. And I had been a fan of Crazy Tim for his few UFC fights. He always was a character, but seemed like a really nice guy. And this documentary was all about how he had this mixed martial arts club, but he was specializing in taking in boys with problems
Mm.
and teaching them how to handle life through training in mixed martial arts. And the star of the gym was Dustin Poirier. But of course, he was another trouble kid. I mean, Dustin dropped out of high school and after his freshman year because he was getting in fights all the time. He was getting in trouble. He was getting in trouble with the police. He was always fighting.
Mm-hmm.
And, Crazy Tim taught him how to turn that to his advantage. And now he's a really upstanding citizen. I don't even know, but he runs this charity where he and his wife give lots and lots of money to the charity. And what he tends to do is he sells his fight kit. He auctions off his fight kit afterwards
Oh wow.
and gives all the money to the charity. And other people have done the same thing. And he gets the other fighters involved. And he's really, really turned into an excellent down home family man who is totally into charity and is totally nice, but kind of the opposite of McGregor's off fight persona. Pretty much exactly the opposite. He's this
Mm-hmm.
Cajun from Lafayette's the center Cajun uh, community in Louisiana. We've got the Cajun versus the Irishman,
Yeah.
but you also have the family man um, philanthropist versus the wild man, crazy money hog. I mean, I liked McGregor when he first came out. He was Irish and he was knocking people out. But then it's his out of the ring stuff that started getting
Yeah.
really outrageous. I mean, punching some old man in the head because he didn't want to drink his horrible whiskey.
Right.
And from what I've heard, that is horrible.
I haven't
It's,
tried it
I
yet.
haven't either, but I'm not going to. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a, he bought it. It didn't like he had it made. He bought
Yeah.
a load of the less expensive. It's either Jameson's or Bushmills. I think it's Bushmills, and it's aged only 3 years. And of course, Proper 12 relates to his area that he lives at in Dublin, grew up at in Dublin. But anybody's not Irish didn't know that, and it makes it sound like it's a 12-year-old whiskey, and it's not. It's a 3-year-old whiskey that they added some vanilla flavoring to. And any
Mm.
whiskey, I've seen a lot of reviews by whiskey experts, and they're all like, this is the worst whiskey we ever drank. He's in a pub and punches some old guy in the head because he offers him a drink and the guy won't take it. And then of course there's the sexual assault charges, and then there's going crazy and throwing the metal dolly through the bus window with the fighters in there, and that was nuts. Um, he's
Yeah.
just out of control. I have a good friend who teaches Tai Chi in Dublin, and he says he's noted for being out of control in town, and in
Mm.
Dublin he gets away with it. Nobody says anything. My friend's brother has a boat, and apparently McGregor's famous for driving his boat around the harbor crazy and almost swamping the other boats all the time, and nobody ever says anything to him about it. So his
Wow.
personal life is, yeah, it's just
Well,
completely
yeah.
uncommendable.
Yeah, for sure. So there's a stark contrast between the two in that sense. Let's go back though to 2014 and talk about that first encounter that they had. Again, it was just a one round fight, but it was a pretty significant one at the time. What do you remember from that fight?
Not much.
Yeah, it was
I
quick.
really don't.
It was
Yeah, it
quick.
was quick, and I didn't pay too much attention to it. In
Yeah,
fact, I'm not even sure that I saw it.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, I'm not sure how quickly it ended. It was a first round TKO. I honestly think it was an early stoppage, but these things are, it's hard to say with these things, but sometimes when there's so much buzz built up around a fight, um sometimes these early stoppages happen, I think, because like there's like all this anticipation, even the ref is caught in that buzz. But
yeah,
basically, he caught him with a swipe that people say they don't know if it was a forearm, an elbow, whatever, to the back of Dustin's head. Dustin goes down, and then Connor hits him with a couple punches. Dustin doesn't put up enough protection, and basically the fight is called. I mean, Dustin got out of the exchange. He didn't look, like he had been phased at all. So he was immediately arguing that it was an early stoppage, early stoppage. But of course, they weren't trying to hear that. Prior to that, Dustin had never been knocked out, never even had a TKO against him. In fact, I think at the time he was historically in the lightweight division, he had like the most finishes and most wins up until that point. So he was like a big deal, and McGregor was the new kid on the block that had a lot of buzz behind him. Um, but really, I mean, the first fight, I don't think it really ever happened.
yeah, and well, also a blow to the back of the head of the back of the neck's illegal.
Right, that's what Dustin's argument was. And when you watch the tape, it doesn't, you can't clearly say it was a blow to the back of the head or accidental kind of exchange kind of thing. Um, but I mean, Dustin didn't look dizzy or anything after that. I mean, how do you feel when it comes to some of the stoppages that happen in the UFC? You think that most of them are fair? Or...
Overall, but there's definitely some quick stoppages, and there, even worse though, there's definitely slow stoppages,
Mm-hmm.
and that's when it gets dangerous when the referee doesn't stop it when he should. And a lot of that happens because the referee has a quick stoppage in one fight, so the next fight he lets it go too long, and that can really damage somebody, damage them badly if they're
Yeah,
already technically out and they're still getting hit. But
yeah.
yeah, the
I mean, it
the
was
the
Herb Dean.
referee.
Herb Dean is usually pretty good with these things.
Well,
Um,
Herb Dean was really good till he wasn't. And really, recently, Herb's been pretty questionable.
yeah,
He's been really had some bad calls over the last couple of years, 2 3 years, and he was good till he wasn't, and his reputation's still carrying him, but he's not the referee that he was.
yeah.
Um,
Well, others argued too. At the time, I remember that McGregor really was, this was early in his career. People didn't really know his tactics as much, and Dustin was like the first big name that he was going against, and he did a lot of that mental game and got in his head. Dustin even said it like, he never disliked someone so much, and how he felt like McGregor did get into his head. How much do you think that plays out in an actual fight?
well, it does. When they get into your head, either with you hate him too much or you have too much respect, either way, it definitely messes up your fight. I think Dustin said he went the other way with Khabib. He gave Khabib too much respect. And so apparently people can get in his head. Hopefully, with this rematch, it won't happen at all.
Right.
but it can definitely affect your game either way. Whether you're too angry, which tightens you up, slows you down, takes you off your game, or you're too much in awe of them, which means you give them too much leeway and you play too much defense and you end up leaving yourself open. Either way, it can be really terrible for your game if the guy actually manages to get in your head.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and at the time too, I'm not sure what. I think Dustin might have been a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. McGregor was a brown belt. Dustin's now a black belt. But the thing that I think people have been talking more about is Dustin's improved boxing. What do you think about that? Do you think his boxing game's gotten better since that fight?
I think his whole game has improved 2 or 3 times over since that fight. I think he's a whole different fighter. I think moving to top team really worked. Like I said, Tim Creeder's gym was really nice people, really nice idea, and really doing good things for the kids of Lafayette. But getting to train with a really top team, top team, and getting to spar and roll with the best guys out there day after day makes a
Yeah.
world of difference, and it has made a world of difference with Dustin.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And he's been I mean active. He had some suspensions and some time off here and there, but he's been super duper active. Um so that definitely plays a role. I mean, McGregor did have that fight last year against Cowboy Cerrone. So I'm interested what you think about that fight. But some people argue that it was a perfect fight because he took almost no hits. Um, but Cowboy is kind of a little bit past his prime for sure, and probably not as much of a contender. What do you think about McGregor's last fight against Cowboy Cerrone?
I was impressed. I would have given Dustin a lot more credence and a lot more chance of winning this if it wasn't for that fight. McGregor
Mm,
really impressed me in that fight. The thing that impressed me were the shoulder strikes. That's something that we do in internal boxing.
mm,
And you got 3 power sources if you do them right. You got the shoulder roll, you got the weight shift, and you got the hip turn, and you got to coordinate them all together to get the full power. And I've never seen anybody but internal martial artists do that before. And McGregor landed 3 in a row really quickly, perfectly. And Donald was pretty much out on his feet then and set up for that kick. That kick was just a follow up finisher, but it was really the shoulders that did him. And I had never seen a mixed martial artist use that technique before. And Connor used it to perfection, which means he is still improving. Before that, I figured he was just going on what he knew. And of course, the whole rap on him is if you want a good chance of beating him, take him down.
mm.
That's ever since Nick Diaz beat him. As far as I'm concerned, beat him twice. I thought not Nick, Nate Diaz, but I thought
Right.
Nate got totally robbed in that decision in the second fight.
I agree.
And of course, he cleanly choked him out in the first fight, no questions asked, and really outpointed him in the second fight, and they gave it to McGregor. But since then, the rap is take him down and see what you can do. I mean, look what Khabib did. And I think Donald knew that and was trying to take him down and ran to these shoulders. And these shoulders, if he can do that at will, are going to be a great deterrent for people taking him down with any high takedown. Going to have to score the double leg and stay away from those shoulders. So he impressed me in that fight. And I think the fact that he was showing that he's still learning new stuff was at an advantage. On the other hand, this new super muscular body, I don't know, it's going to make it harder for him to get down to lightweight.
Mm-hmm.
And then number two, a bodybuilder's body is never good for a fighter.
Right.
You know, those tight muscles slow you down. They slow your punches. The, they weigh on you. They mess with your stamina. That kind of body that looks really sculpted and
They
really
take more
nice, really,
oxygen.
yeah, it really doesn't work in fighting. I mean, look what happened to Paulo Costa when he finally ran into somebody who could fight as well or better than him. His body completely gave up on him. It's like, so I see an advantage in Connor actually learning new techniques, but I see a disadvantage of him going out and getting this beautiful sculpted body. So it's sort of up and down there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that is what stands out in my mind as well is that Conor is not on the way down in his career per se as a fighter, but is getting better. Might be going up. I mean, the time off though is definitely significant. Conor's whole thing was after all the controversy and the loss to Khabib and all that stuff, and he took the significant time off from fighting. And when he came back, he was saying that 2020 was going to be his year. That he was going to come back to dominance. He started really, really strong with that fight last January against Cowboy, but then of course the pandemic hit, and it got hard to get fights organized. I'm not sure why they didn't give him another fight though, because fights were still happening. Um, I don't know what was going on with that, but he didn't get another
He
fight.
probably turned them down because they weren't offering him the money that he wanted
Yeah,
because they were having trouble making the same amount of money with these empty arenas. But and he has a tendency to take spaces between fights. And a statistic that no one pays attention to is Conor has never defended a title. He's won all of these titles, but he has never had a title defense. He wins a title, he moves on to somewhere else. And it's interesting because, the old lore is you're not really the champion until you've defended it. And he has never defended any of his titles ever.
yeah, he has a commitment
So,
issue for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, and
yeah,
that's a bit questionable also as to how much he can hang in one place. And he seems to be like a guy that goes from one woman to the next woman to the next woman because he just needs the rush of something new. And when it's over, he moves. We all know those guys.
yeah,
And he's like that with fighting. Once he's had the rush of winning the title, he's got to go on to something else. It's going to seem like a big rush to him. Like, boxing Mayweather, which
yeah,
is, people don't get it. Conor was a boxer before he was a mixed martial artist, and he trained in boxing his whole life. It wasn't like he was one of these mixed martial arts guys that did wrestling or jujitsu and picked up striking in mixed martial arts. He does have a boxing background. But I mean, he didn't have the background to be taking on the best boxer of the era. It's like, even though he was counting on him being past his prime because he was retired, but the guy's the best boxer of the era. He's,
I mean, considering he did decent, all right.
well, Floyd didn't fight his own regular fight because he really wanted to get the guy.
Yeah,
So he fought in McGregor's wheelhouse until he got a chance to knock him out, and then he did it. Because normally, if he just fought his defensive scoring points thing, McGregor probably never would have touched him for 12 rounds. People would have said, what a boring fight. And McGregor wouldn't have got the emotional release of having stopped him. So, I mean, Mayweather. So
right,
Mayweather didn't fight his regular fight and got in McGregor's wheelhouse so that he could stop him, and he did.
right. So yeah, so there's a couple of moving parts here. I mean, also too, in the past 5 years or so, so since I think 15 or 16, I was looking at the stats. McGregor's only fought about like 5 or 6 times, one of those being a loss, while Dustin's fought like a dozen times. Um, Almost all of them wins except for the Khabib fight and then that Michael Johnson fight. Oh, he had the draw too with Eddie Alvarez. But he had a very significant win as well last summer. He had that win against Dan Hooker. Did you see that fight?
Yes. He also has a win against Justin Gagey, which is nothing to
Yeah.
sneeze at.
Yeah. Who's that?
You know,
I mean, because there was the argument that Justin would get the belt when Khabib went, and then like, no, McGregor's back. Poirier's still the top contender here. So it seems like what they're gonna do is they're gonna end up whoever the winner is of this fight is gonna fight Gagey. It seems like, right?
it would be the logical thing. It would definitely be the logical thing. I mean, Gagey had a horrible thing of getting starry-eyed against Khabib, and it never should have happened because Gagey is a fighter's fighter. He loves to fight. I mean, when he was fighting Ferguson at the end, he's in the corner, and his corner man says, don't get carried away. Keep doing what you're doing. You remember the last times you got carried away? And Gagey looked at him and goes, "Yeah, I was having too much fun." It's like he just loves to fight. He's the only guy when he first showed up in the UFC. I've never heard anyone say something like this. He said, "These guys are top caliber. Eventually, I'll probably get knocked out. But I'll knock a lot of guys out, and I'll guarantee all my fights will be fun." And they have been,
They
except for
have been.
Khabib. Every one of his fights have been amazing. And the fights he lost got fight of the night. He's done exactly what he said he would do, except Khabib. And Khabib just got, I don't know, maybe he's wrestling that bear as a kid, but have you seen those films? His
I haven't
father
seen
actually had,
films, but I mean, I've heard the stories for sure.
oh, there's films. His father had him wrestling a bear cub. There are films of it. I've seen it.
That's significant.
But yeah, he's just got something about him as a fighter. He's a scary individual as a person, but he's got something about him as a fighter. And his good parts as a person, he is really family oriented. So I think only for something as big as St. Pierre will he come back. Other than that, he'll respect his mother's wishes.
Yeah. Well, and also too, I mean, we're talking about Khabib again. Khabib's main coach was his father, and so that even though he was able to come into that last fight and win the fight. There's no doubt that that affects your game going forward and just your spirit and energy behind the game. But yeah, like you said, Dustin did beat Justin Gaethje back in I think it was 2018. That's a significant win. That fight against Dan Hooker though, that thing was a real warrior match there, and also significant, which I think we should talk about maybe after the analysis of the Dan Hooker win. There's not going to be an audience. How's that going to affect someone like McGregor? This is his first fight without an audience. But first, before we get to that, what do you think about the Dan Hooker fight?
Well, Dan Hooker's good. Dan Hooker can hang in there with anyone. And they went the distance. They went the distance. And in fact, one of the reasons I'm going to be willing to pay the $70, by the way, this is the first pay-per-view that's gone up to $70,
Oh my gosh!
because they just added a co-main of Dan Hooker versus Michael Chandler.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And yeah, they just added it. That's going to be the co-main event. That makes it
Cool.
worth the money. And of course, Chandler was 3 times Bellator lightweight champion. And Hooker's last fight, I think it's his last fight, was going the distance with Poirier, going the whole distance. And Chandler's last fight was he knocked out Benson Henderson.
Yeah.
So that should be, I mean, Chandler wanted a top 10 guy, and Hooker's in the bottom 10. I think he's like 12 or 13 ranked. But I think Chandler's going to have all he can
Hooker's number
handle.
6 actually. Still, they just ranked him. You know the UFC rankings are
Yeah.
horrible. He's number 6.
Oh, so he got his top 10 guy.
Yeah, he got it.
But
But
yeah,
yeah,
that
no, they
that
went
should
the
be,
distance. That was fine. I mean, it's also significant to go the distance. 5 rounds of real fighting, not holding back. I mean, they were going back and forth for a while. Last round, definitely Poirier kind of just like took dominance, but um, you know, it was they both got in good shots. They were both looking pretty banged up afterwards.
yeah, like I said, I'm really looking forward to Chandler and Hooker almost as much as McGregor and Poirier. Should be a really good fight. And of course, if that fight's good enough, the winner of that's going to have a case of jumping ahead of Gagey.
Oh, poor Gagey.
So,
Sitting in the bleachers, watching it all happen.
well, he may get in there. You know,
Yeah,
it all depends.
I think he's still number 3.
Yep.
I'm not sure how they do that ranking right now in lightweight. All right, so yeah, so Dustin had this really good win against Dan Hooker. It was more recent. It was in the summertime. But for me, more significant, it was during the pandemic without a crowd. Fighters have already talked about the difference fighting without a crowd. But I think even more significant for Conor McGregor, who has this persona and loves the energy that he gets from the crowd, whether they love or hate him. What do you think the effect will be on a fighter like Conor McGregor in this situation?
Remains to be seen. We haven't seen it. It could definitely sap a lot of his basic energy, or he may not care. He may just be, his own ego's enough. He's certainly got plenty of it. Um, was Poirier Ferguson fight. Oh, it was Gagey and Ferguson. That's right. That was no audience either. It didn't slow those boys down a bit. That was a war.
I mean,
Um,
there's enough people in there that it kind of feels like you're fighting uh, at your own gym. You know, you got like that kind of energy. Your coaches, you can hear everything they're saying. You might be able to even hear some commentators and what they're saying. There's still fans cheering to some degree, but there's something unique about fighting in your own gym and hearing when your punch lands and all that kind of stuff. I mean, when I'm watching it as a fan, it's kind of cool to hear all the breathing and the hard contact. It's a kind of different experience.
yeah, I love hearing the contact. I love hearing the contact. I have never liked the concept that in mixed martial arts they let the coaches coach during the fight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in most fight circumstances, if a trainer starts yelling during the fight, he can be censored. His corner can be fined. It's just not allowed. And I think it's ridiculous that MMA works it, that they work for listening to their coaches. Because the one thing, when you're listening to the coach, you don't have your full attention on your opponent. And a lot of mistakes and slip ups can happen because they're listening to the coach. And on the other end, the trainer's supposed to be good enough to get what he wants the guy to do in the corner between rounds. And then the guy goes out and do it. You know, I don't like this yelling coaching during the fight. And the fact that we can hear it crystal clear now annoys me even more.
It's
Oh,
almost like a team sport because they get into some of these grapple situations where literally the coaches are telling them what they can see from their perspective and the next move to make. It makes it almost not a
yeah.
one-on-one match anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It makes it almost like a team sport.
Yeah.
I don't I don't like team
I mean,
sports. Um
even the coaches kind of distracting or using tactics to confuse um, their fighters' opponents. We've seen that play out a lot now too.
yeah, yeah, I don't like the fact that the trainers are allowed to yell and scream whatever they want, you know. And it makes, and then in the corner they often just act like cheerleaders because they've already done the technical stuff and they'll do the technical stuff during the fight. So the art of a trainer being able to get through to his fighter in the corner and tell him what he needs and have him send him out to do it is almost, it's a whole different thing. The art of being a trainer is disappearing.
Mm. In fact, they probably have people in their corner too that are probably not the best trainers, but who can be the best cheerleader or distractor. That might be a tactic when some of these people are picking their corners out.
Yeah, well, camps have always had cheerleaders.
Yeah.
Muhammad Ali had Bundini Brown, who was not only a cheerleader, but he thought up everything clever that Ali was ever supposed to have said was actually thought up by Bundini Brown,
Is that
who had
right?
been the yeah, who had been the same thing in Sugar Ray Robinson's camp. And when Robinson retired, he brought him to Ali. And he was a guy, I mean, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, rumble, young man, rumble, Bundini Brown. It was all it was it
That's
was all
crazy.
Bundini Brown. And I think one of the things that tells you where Ali was as a person was Bundini Brown died in a pauper's hospital. And Ali went and visited him and said, gee, you know, I'll miss you. It's too bad, but made no attempt to upgrade his medical treatment at all. After he was the guy that, like I said, everything clever that ever came out of Ali's mouth, the names for the people and all this and that, was all Bundini Brown.
Mm, wow. So yeah, yes, it's definitely significant with the less crowd there. That component of the fight. So we got Dustin on one side who has been a great fighter for his career. I mean, he's been in the UFC now for almost 11 years after the merger of his old I forget what they were called, their federation or whatever.
WEC.
Yeah, WC. After they merged with the UFC, so since 2000, he's been in the UFC. Um, he had that interim belt for a while, but I definitely think he feels like the loss against McGregor and then McGregor moving on to then the next following year becoming a champion and that kind of trajectory that McGregor had, Dustin feeling um, like there was there could have been a lot different in his career had he won that fight against McGregor. Maybe it wouldn't have been, but that's definitely, I think, in his mind. While you have a Conor McGregor who is trying to come back, show that he is not only still a good fighter and a contender, but probably entering into a deeper phase of his prime. And so there's a lot of that going into it. What does Poirier have to do to win this fight in your mind?
Well, it all depends on which McGregor shows up. If McGregor's really focused on Poirier, Poirier is going to have to be at his best in everything. He's going to have to be at his best in striking. He's going to have to close the distance. He's going to have to take him down, turn it into a grappling match, which he will win. This whole thing of Connor's jiu-jitsu being underrated. I mean, he's a brown belt under Kavanaugh. Who did Kavanaugh train with? You know, it's like, and I think Dustin's got his belt from legitimate Brazilian jiu-jitsu people. And
Yeah, he has it from who's that guy? It was like a champion jiu-jitsu guy. I forget his name. But yeah, yeah, for sure. It's definitely a more legit black belt.
yeah, and 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 he's a black belt. I mean, McGregor's still just a brown belt under Kavanaugh. Um, so, but if McGregor's really focused, he's going to have to be on top of it. If McGregor doesn't have trouble making the weight, that's going to present a problem also. And if McGregor's still working on learning new techniques, it gets really, really rough. On the other hand, McGregor seems more focused on getting Khabib back in the ring and
Mm.
looking at this as just a stepping stone of getting back to Khabib, which is his and Dana's dream of happening, which I think probably has about as much chance of happening as Trump becoming president next year, but or next month. But but they're as focused on that as he is. It's like they want Khabib. They're convinced that they can throw enough money at Khabib and tell him his father wanted him to go 30-0 and get him to come back against Conor McGregor. And if he's focused on that instead of being focused on Dustin Poirier, and if because of the muscle he has trouble making weight, and he doesn't really work on doing new training stuff, he just figures he beat this guy before, then I think that Poirier could actually have a relatively easy time with him. So the intangibles are strong enough that when you combine it with the statistics being equal, win, loss, height, weight, etc., I think it's a 50-50 fight. You don't know till it happens. It could go either way quite easily.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of commentating and stuff I've seen online about it. I think fighters all agree that it's this 50-50, but then there's a lot of fans who are just so engrossed with the McGregor stuff that they are kind of counting Dustin out, which is kind of absurd. Um, some people are arguing though that like kind of what you're saying about the muscle that McGregor has on him, the weight cut, that if McGregor comes out very strong and quick and powerful in the first round, um, that he wins with his boxing, Dustin won't be able to get him down early on because of the quickness and because of these new techniques. That's what a lot of folks are saying. And then as McGregor starts wearing down a little bit, if Dustin can stay protected and not get banged up, that Dustin then starts becoming a little bit more dominant, especially if it gets taken to the ground and becomes a grapple game, that Dustin wins that. Um, I mean, but I still think from that Dan Hooker fight, Dan Hooker is not as good a boxer as McGregor for sure, but I think Dustin did really, really good boxing, combining it with his grapple game. So I think Dustin's boxing is much stronger than people give him credit for at this point.
People should give him credit. I mean, his boxing is as good as his grappling now. I think he's an equal overall fighter. Like I said, I think he's 2, 3 times the fighter he was in his first match with McGregor. And he's improved all over the place. And I think his striking, he can stand with anyone. And Dan Hooker may not have McGregor's boxing skills, but he sure has the physique. I mean, with Hooker, you got to deal with these arms that are like twice as long as McGregor's, and he knows how to use them. And Poirier managed to, not let that throw him off and not get kept on the end of that long jab. And I think Poirier's striking can hang with McGregor's, period. I don't think he has to take him down to win. I think he can beat him on his feet. And and then, of course, if he gets him on the ground, he's got an advantage, but I don't think he actually has to do that. It'll
Mm.
all depend on how sharp and focused McGregor is and how much McGregor's actually off in Khabib land instead of paying attention to what he's supposed to be doing at the moment.
All right. So if Dustin wins this, what's that do for his career? And where does he go after the win? Does that bring him to the top of his game and a belt contender?
Absolutely. I mean, these guys are belt contenders, period. They're belt contenders already.
This could
This
have been a
fight
belt
should
fight right
actually,
now.
yeah, it should have been for the belt. So I would imagine that I can't see Khabib coming back to fight the winner of this, no matter what. Like I said, I only see him coming back for St. Pierre. And if they don't put that together, if St. Pierre wises up and realizes there's nothing to be gained from doing this fight, that I would imagine Poirier Gagey for the title.
Yep.
That's what I would
Chandler not too
imagine.
far
And
behind if he wins against Dan Hooker.
if he wins against Dan Hooker, or Dan Hooker not too far behind if he manages to trash Chandler. So, those would be the three guys. And I would imagine that if McGregor loses, he'll go back to welterweight and claim the weight cut was the problem.
That's what I was just gonna
Um,
ask. So if McGregor wins, he pushes for that Khabib fight. You think
yep.
probably with no success, and
But
then
they'll
just
they'll
settles
spend a
on.
long time it'll be horrible because the title will stay in limbo, and he and Dana will push, 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 push for the Khabib fight while the title stays in limbo. Maybe they'll let Poirier and Gagey fight for an interim title, but I don't think either of them want it again. Gagey didn't want it in the first place. I know you saw that fight, but when he won the interim title, they handed it to him and he threw it on the floor.
Yeah.
They said, "Why'd you do that?" He said, "Not the real title. I'm going to wait till I get the real one." And
Yep.
that was something Khabib really respected, by the way. He said he respected that out of Gaethje. But so I don't think they want to fight for an interim title. So yeah, if McGregor wins, it's going to put the weight class in a static place where it just hangs out, and we start to lose interest in lightweights, no matter how much talent's there. And
Well,
some of
he's
them
done
may
that
start
before,
moving.
so there's definitely
Yep.
no saying that he won't do it again.
Oh yeah. Um.
But
So they're
Dana
just.
loves McGregor. What's that all about? Just make some
I don't
money.
know. No, he seems to have a thing for McGregor. I wouldn't even want to play with the idea, but it's almost a Trump Putin thing. He just seems
Yeah.
to really, really love McGregor. Um, it's crazy, crazy. He does anything for McGregor. I'm amazed they didn't give him a piece of the. He was at one point staying out because he wanted a piece of the company,
Mm.
and I think Dana probably would have given it to him. But of course, there's this new big corporation that owns it now. They're not going to give a piece of the
Mm.
company to McGregor. Um, But yeah, because his and Dana's relationship, I think if he wins, the lightweight division goes into stasis, and some of these guys may start moving up or down to get more action and a better chance at a title shot. Um, Speaking of which, up or down, I think Khabib's best fight of people that are actually fighting at the moment would be Usman, but of course he doesn't have the name, so no one's even mentioned it, I think, but me. But Usman is a hell of a wrestler and a tough guy, very tough guy. And I think the toughest fight out there among the active fighters
Mm.
for Khabib would be Usman. Move up a weight class and take on Usman. But it'll probably never happen because Usman doesn't have the big publicity going for him.
Yeah, that would be an amazing fight, though.
Yeah, it'd be an incredible fight.
Yeah. I mean,
Incredible fight.
yeah,
Usman's someone that could match him in wrestling.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I like McGregor in welterweight kind of area, and I don't. I mean, I have mixed feelings about him because I have my personal feelings about him outside of the ring. I know he's a amazing fighter. He does he's brought a lot of fans to the sport for good and bad reasons. So there's significance for him being around and being a presence. But yeah, I think this stuff that him and Dana do with holding on to belts and basically shutting down divisions is just kind of ridiculous. There's no regulation around it. Interim belts all over the place is so annoying. You got a bunch of divisions, then you got all these interim belts, and then you got people holding on to their belts without fighting and defending them, like you were saying. It's just kind of absurd.
Yep. Yeah, it
All right, so
happens
we'll
too
see. Yeah,
much.
we'll see. So yeah,
But like
so
I said, it's a 50-50 fight, and Chandler versus Hooker actually makes it worth the money, which was
yeah,
debatable
not that
before with
we're
it.
endorsing them at all, but we'll probably be watching for sure.
Yeah, the price going up was I was almost gonna not do it till they've got this co-main because they had nothing for a co-main. They had Jessica I versus one of the other women that's been around forever. It's like that was no co-main,
Yeah.
but they got a good co-main now, so I'll
Well,
probably watch it.
Dana was talking about. I mean, he really started off the year with this is their big fight of the year to start off the year, and he was saying the price increase and also that they're gonna be much firmer on people pirating and streaming the fight illegally. And then it started this barrage of like online tweets and people just like making fun of him and saying that they're still gonna pirate it and all that kind of stuff. And he was like, "Oh, we have something big planned for you pirators this year." It's like this whole back and forth media thing. So yeah, not only is a raise in price, there's all this things going on about him like really going after and attacking illegal streamers, and this big effort on his part to make that happen. I have my own history with the UFC, so whatever. But yeah, I think it's kind of absurd that it's costing so much to watch these fights.
Yeah, but it's I mean the boxing pay-per-views are going up too. And boxing pay-per-views for a while now have been a main event and a undercard that's filled with who? Like,
Right.
and
Exactly. Well, they're doing it because they're not getting the revenue from fans being in person.
no, I mean boxing's been doing that for years and years. It's the undercard just get worse and worse and worse. And it used to be one of the differences with the UFC was they gave you good undercards.
Right.
And I think Dana's realized that he can save a bunch of money by not putting so much money into the undercards.
Yeah.
And of course, also he's got fighters pushing for wanting to make better money, and so that's probably got something else to do with using more unknown fighters. And plus, I must admit, during the pandemic, there's been an awful lot of fights falling through, been an awful lot of main card fighters that either they get the virus or someone in their camp gets the virus or their country gets the virus bad, they can't get out of their country.
Quarantine. Yeah.
There's been a lot of that. So they've been using apparently a lot of like Eastern European fighters because they can get to Abu Dhabi easily from where they are, and
Yeah.
that and doing the fights in their own gym in Las Vegas. I don't know how many people got it because they gave it another name, but that's their gym that they always use to the Ultimate Fighter is what they're putting them in.
Yeah.
It's the UFC gym that they own.
Yeah.
And that seems to be it for places that they can go at the moment. But it's
Right.
commendable that they're actually putting on fights that we can watch. But
Yeah. No, for sure.
apparently they're apparently the pay-per-views are going to start charging us $70.
Well, in any case, so yeah, so it'll be happening Saturday, January 23rd. We'll have that rematch between Poirier and McGregor. It means a lot for the lightweight division for sure. As Khabib retires, and there's a big opening in the championship. Who has the belt in that division? And of course,
So
a
we
big
hope
deal
it means
for
a lot.
yeah. Hopefully it's not sat on, but yeah. So we'll be watching for sure, and maybe we'll do a post analysis on the fight depending on how entertaining and good it is. If it's noteworthy. But yeah, so y'all be seeing more from us in terms of fight analysis and talking about not only MMA, but also boxing and other combative sport arenas. We'll be talking more about that on the podcast. So look forward for that. Also, too, some quick housekeeping. Remember to drop a subscription if you're digging what we're talking about here on the podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to us on whatever podcast user you use. We're on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Pandora now. We're on all the streaming services. So definitely follow us, subscribe to us there. Drop a review on iTunes. If you got a moment, that does a lot for us to get more recognitions on the different algorithms out there. And then also to check out, the Wudang Physical Culture Association. So our website is in the show notes. You can find more information about Frank and Tina and the classes that they're hosting online right now that people can get access to for a very affordable price. How the new class is going. We have the new Bagua weapons class, and how's everything going with the new classes?
Well, the first new Wednesday night will be tonight, but last Friday, I didn't know how it would go because it was New Year's Day, but I wanted to kick it off. So we started the new Friday classes last Friday and it went very well. Very well. People seem to like it a lot. We did the elbow knives. We did the internal foundations and principles within basic fighting. It took off quite well.
Awesome. Yeah. So you can find Tina's email in our show notes. So you can shoot Tina an email, get more information about the schedule that we have going on right now. Classes are all happening virtually because of the circumstances that are happening in the world right now. But that's a great opportunity for people to start training some of these internal martial arts with us. And that's again, super affordable. So hit Tina up, get some more information about that and see how you can access it. And then also too, we'll probably drop the show a week or two before the actual fight. But we have a lot of cool episodes coming up. So depending on when they get released, we got a lot of cool ones coming up. So be on the lookout for the upcoming episodes. All right, Frank, anything else you wanted to share about the fight?
No, that's it for the
All
fight.
right.
Maybe at some point we can mention Ryan Garcia, young boxer who fought this week, who's the up and coming boxing star.
Oh, cool. Yeah, definitely. Maybe we'll have a whole show talking about that. Talking about what's going on in boxing and definitely talk about Ryan Garcia for sure. All right, cool. All right, Frank. So we'll talk next week.
Okay.
All right.
Take care, Sean.
Bye.